Welcome to the Node.js Technical Steering Committee meeting for February 25th, 2021. We'll follow our standard agenda, which was outlined, or the agenda that was outlined in the GitHub issue 972. Before we get started, are there any announcements that anybody would like to share this week? Okay, sounds like not. So CPC and board meeting updates. On the board front, there is a board meeting this week. So if anybody has anything that they think I should be bringing up to the board, let me know. I don't have anything currently on my list. In terms of CPC updates, I'll just thinking if there's anything key since Mary isn't here today. I don't think there's anything in particular except that it is worth mentioning that email thread about some reach out from the OpenJS Foundation in terms of what the standards team is doing. They're evaluating some different options of what they would focus on, and they'd really like some feedback. I've been in a few meetings with some of the other project TSCs, and it's interesting to kind of to get that feedback. So if you can find that email thread and sort of respond if you are interested, I'll be looking to set that up in the near, maybe I should wait till the end of this week and then actually go ahead and set something up. So if you can respond and look for that, that would be great. And I see that Mary just joined us, so maybe we'll give her a minute to see if she's got anything else on the CPC front to highlight. So Mary, I know you just joined, but we were at the CPC section of the agenda. So I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add and or highlight in particular what's going on the CPC front.
I don't have anything.
Okay. So let's move on to the issues which are tagged for the agenda then. The first one is 37308, doc update CI requirements for landing pull requests. That's number 37308. I don't know if anybody here has been in that discussion. Let's see who put it on the agenda. So I guess it was added by Antoine Duhamel. And I'm just seeing if anybody has commented.
I don't know if this needs to be on the agenda, to be honest.
Yeah, is it being blocked or anything, or?
It was blocked, but it was put on the agenda before it was even blocked. I think the person in question just wanted some reassurance, but my general take is this can probably go through. Yeah, this can probably go through normal review process.
Okay. Right. So okay. So I think other people agree. Does that make sense?
I'm opening the issue, but if it's a change to landing requirements, it requires TSC approval.
Okay. So it does require a couple of TSC approvers. How many do we have so far?
2, 3. We already have 4.
Okay, so it's already got the CPC approvals that it needs, right?
Yes.
And I think in the end, this one basically just documents that you don't need to run the CI, like a full CI, if there's, which directories we consider not to be touched by, basically running the CI isn't going to help anyway, I think is the point.
Yeah, I'm not sure it actually changes things other than making it clearer, because we already have language around.
It does change something, actually. It changes the fact that now, with this change, we need a green GitHub Action CI to land something.
Okay, so basically that's adds requirement for green GitHub CI. That one, how often is that true? I know we've had some cases where, I know at least recently, I've seen that not be the case. But does anybody have concerns with that as a requirement?
I mean, there's definitely, just going through a history of PRs, there's definitely a good percentage that get landed without the green.
Well, recently there was a problem with the ASAN job, which was failing, I think 100% of the time, and that was introduced by a pull request. So with this requirement, we would not have had this issue.
Right. And I see like the last, I'm just looking at the latest ones. I'm just looking at the last 3 or 4 PRs, and they all seem to be passing the checks.
Sorry, can we promote Tobias?
Yep. Sorry, thanks for pointing that out. So I think I think if we believe that we've got it green and we can keep it green, we should then definitely we should make it. It makes sense to me to make it a requirement, is what I'm trying to say. Anybody, what are thoughts on that? So that does seem to be the biggest change. So no objections. It sounds like from people who are here. Okay, I'm going to write that in from TSC members. Meeting going to removed agenda tag and seems to be progressing through the regular review process. Okay, that sound good to everybody?
Could you promote Miles, just in case he has something to say about this?
Yep, sure, there we go.
I don't even know what we're talking about. I don't have something particular to say.
We're talking about the updating the CI requirements pull request. It's this one. The main difference that we were discussing was that it adds the requirement for the GitHub Actions to be green.
I thought that they were already.
Yeah, no, it wasn't. And things, I think, were often landed without that because they weren't all that green. But it sounds like we've got them green, and we believe we'll keep them that way. So I think that's why it made sense to me. So
I guess like just one question that I have there is, I believe, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the actions are just running our existing test suite. So if we have things marked as flaky, they're not, and they fail, GitHub CI will still be green. It's not going to show yellow like we do in Jenkins, but we'll catch that in Jenkins. So that would be the only thing that I would flag on. And I don't think it's an issue, but as long as flaky tests are respected, then I'm +1 on this. I guess the only thing that I've seen with GitHub Actions that can be an issue, and maybe this is something I can follow up internally with GitHub to see if it can get higher powered machines, is sometimes, and I've seen this with the Mac machines, for example, they just take a really, really long time and they can time out, and then you have to run it again. And so in general, it's just really frustrating when you're trying to get something landed and you know that it's good, but the problems that you're running into are infrastructural.
yeah.
But I think we can revisit that if this becomes an issue.
Yeah, I think from the flaky test part, though, they should be configured so that flaky tests, like it's reported as not a failure.
I believe that that's the case right now.
Yeah.
I just think it shows green, not yellow. I don't like.
Okay.
That
that's
was
probably
more,
okay too.
Yeah, because we catch it in Jenkins. So like, as long as it isn't our only CI, it's not an issue.
Yeah. Okay, so that one, it sounds like we didn't object. I've removed the tag. Did I remove the tag? I'm going to remove the agenda tag, and basically it looks like it's well on its way to land. Doesn't need any more discussion here. Okay, the next one. The next issue is deps add yarn to yarn 1.22.5. That one I basically added my objection to it. I think it needs to be personally an explicit action by the TSC to say we're going to take in a second package manager. And that's why I added my blocking objection to that. So I think it's up to us to decide what the next step is. You know, how do we want to progress in terms of like coming to an answer to that? You know, do we schedule a vote? Do we do whatever? So I don't know what people's thoughts are.
Unless we have consensus that it's not going to land, I think it's going to need a vote.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at, is like there's been lots and lots of discussions. You know, I think like looking at it as any other PR, I don't think more discussion is just more discussion. I shouldn't say wouldn't change my mind, but like, you know, the more discussion would effectively be the rest of the TSC or a significant portion of the TSC members expressing support for it. And then I'd say, okay, that's what I was looking for, right? But that's effectively, you know, forcing a vote, I guess, anyway. So I guess the question might be, do we think there's anything we should do before we call for a vote?
I'm treading lightly here because I also have not decided, but I may abstain from voting just because of the conflict of interest with NPM. But the one thing that I do think that we should be on the same page about prior to a vote is we've had the ongoing discussion about like the package manager and the binary manager summit that we did. And like, I recognize that there needs to be work there to move that forward. But I think that coupled to the vote to include this, if we do it, needs to be a decision about those other two things, because to me, it wouldn't make sense to include yarn directly in the tree if the package manager is also coming or the binary manager is also coming. Now, I recognize that this creates a scenario where like we basically have all the stop energy because the things that we're talking about building are really big and we don't necessarily have people driving it. So I'm not advocating for any particular approach, but I do think that if we are going to vote, we need to settle all of these issues all at once. And we can't leave the other ones hanging because this can't be a decision made by itself.
So what would should include in vote some of the other concerns as well?
Or at the very least, like if we vote and we vote to include yarn, we should be like making it clear that the other two initiatives are likely not moving forward, or at least the package manager. The binary management thing, I think, can still work even if yarn is in the tree because we're still talking about managing NPM with it. It just would change the scope. But I just think we need to be clear about what the future of these other initiatives are. Because to me, at least, this feels like, and I haven't had a chance to speak to Mail one-to-one, but like he was pushing for PMM. I'm not sure if he was doing that because we couldn't, like, I know at first they didn't want to just vendor in yarn. So I think that may even be a preferred solution. But we just need to kind of settle all those at once.
Right. So I think the binary one, like you know, the binary one I think is kind of a separate effort, right, and a different thing. But I do agree that like the PMM one is fairly closely tied. So maybe the vote should be like, do we include yarn? Do we include PMM, or do we leave as is for now? If that's kind of like, does that cover what you were suggesting?
Yeah, I think it does.
Probably before we vote on this, we should bring the PR author to a meeting to argue in favor of it.
Sorry, can you say that again?
Before we vote on including or not yarn or core pack or whatever we decide to vote on, I think we should invite Mayo to argue in favor of those requests.
Yeah, that would make sense to me. I guess, should it be a wider call? Like, you know, I know through the past discussions, there's like, you know, some people who are in favor, there's some people who are not in favor. I'm wondering if it should be more of a, we invite whoever has an opinion and wants to present that.
So while I think that makes sense, I'm worried that it's going to become just another binary summit.
Right, yeah.
Rather than a summit, we did do big kind of like ecosystem-wide surveys for stuff like the promise, like unhandled rejection errors and other big changes that we were going to do. Do we think that this is something that could benefit from, you know, like similar user research?
I think like some research like that would be useful. I think equally though, there's the research related to, you know, additional, like the collaborators, right? Because it's basically pulling in another thing, and at least for me, part of the concern is it's another thing to maintain. You know, more security vulnerabilities, more whatever. So it's yeah, we could definitely use more data from the community, from our own collaborators. There's lots of other discussions that were started and are going on that front.
I guess the reason I asked that is, and I'm not trying to lead it here, but the premise of the value of this is for developers and users. Like that is the reason why Mail is pushing for this, right? It's like it's extra work for developers to have to install Yarn separately from Node. And so that's where I feel like doing research like this would be useful if we can do some wide asking, is like, we have our own concerns from a maintainer's perspective, but that doesn't really jive with like the premise of why this is a positive change. It's like potentially reasons not to do it, but I think that like some research to prove like the premise of the change could be useful in helping us make a decision.
So yeah, I agree. It seems like there's like the reason this PR was opened, despite the other discussions that were, I think, working on that, which was just let's PR and see, you know, see, right? So like it's, I kind of wonder, like, should we be just saying, you know, we're not going to make a decision until we get more info? I guess that's perfectly valid. The other thing could be just say, actually, our decision is no until there is this additional information, right? Which is effectively what we're saying. If we just say, we're not going to make a decision until there's more info.
I mean, like every decision is effectively no until we say yes.
Yeah, yes. I'm just like, we could just leave this until, I guess, like I was thinking this was like, you know, there were discussions going on. This was kind of a way to force the issue for us to actually come to some agreement or not.
I guess I'll frame it slightly differently. I think similar to some of the things that we try to do around performance, right? Like it's easy to say this will affect performance and we shouldn't do this, but we've been trying to put the onus on the people who are bringing those objections to do the work to kind of prove that it will indeed be a performance problem. We as a project and as a foundation have the resources to do this kind of research that Mael may not. And so I feel like the onus is on us. And we could say no from like a maintenance standpoint, but I feel like if we were to make a decision, either yes or no, doing a survey like this to see what how our community feels. It feels like a good use of the resources that we have, and we are in a unique position to do that other people cannot.
So I guess in that case, it would be finding a volunteer who would lead getting that survey completed. Do we have any volunteers? I guess we could back up one step and say, do we have consensus, at least with the people here, that we don't want to vote until we do like additional research survey, so forth?
I think yes, as long as we enumerate what those things are. Otherwise, for the request author, it's an indefinite await.
I just dropped like 4 questions into the chat that I feel could be this entire survey. If we're okay with that, we could even just kind of like hand that off to Rachel and let it go, which is like, do you use NPM? Do you use Yarn? Do you use PNPM? Do you use another package manager, which would be like write-in? And should we include Yarn in the official Node.js distribution? And then a short write-in of like, thoughts and feelings. But
so I guess I would ask, would everybody, if basically that says, should we include Yarn in the official distribution? So, okay, everybody says yes. Would we just say, okay, yep, let's land this? I just want to do the sanity check that, like, how are we going to use this, and would it unlock the current discussion?
I think it should be used.
Go ahead.
I think it should be used the same way we did with the promises survey. It doesn't decide for us, but it helps us. It helps us decide, like individually, for when we vote.
Right, and I just was doing the sanity check that the answers to those questions will help this group, like the people who are here. Would that data help you make a decision?
Yes, for me at least.
Other people?
I think that it, sorry.
Just yes, useful feedback and used to base decisions for me, at least.
I think as I mentioned, I will likely abstain from the actual vote and decision making because of a conflict of interest. But I think just like simply from a decision making framework, like there's a premise that this is built on, and I think that confirming that at least will help with making the reason for the decision clear. A lot of the reasons to not include it, I think, come down to like process and technical. So I think that there still are hanging questions, especially around like, how do we decide which ones to include? Do we include PM? Do we have a process to decide how these things are included? That this survey does not answer for us, but the base premise that this helps users and users want this, I think deserves having some clear evidence to back it up, because that's the premise of starting the discussion, not necessarily why we're making the decision.
Right. I was just thinking, I rewrote one of your questions, because I don't think just asking like, should we include it? It's more like asking if they're like, does it add value if it's included?
Yeah, that's a bit of a leading question though, because I guess there's people who would add no value to, but if you use Yarn, it would add value. But yeah,
well,
maybe we need to tweak
I'm trying to get
bit.
a, like, not just you want it included, but like, does it? Yeah, I know what you're saying, but I think that question we need is the key one to say, like, you don't want it to just be, yeah, of course it's free. Why, you know, no cost to me. Why
guess
not?
like an inverse could also be like, do you use Yarn today? How do you get Yarn? Do you find it is unnecessary? There's an unnecessary amount of friction in getting it, because like that is part of the premise as well, that it's like hard to get.
Right.
Yeah.
So I think it still comes back to, we'll need a volunteer to kind of lead that, like putting together the survey questions, getting consensus on what they are, and working with the foundation to get the survey out there. It sounds like the proposal seems to be that we shouldn't necessarily move to a vote yet. Instead, we should try and get a survey out there, and you know, the next step is to find a volunteer who would lead that survey to gather more data to help us be able to make an informed decision. Does that reflect what people are thinking? So is it fair if I write that the consensus seems to be consensus seems to be to try to do survey before vote. Next step is to find volunteer. No objections to that. I'll take silence as like agreeing. That's, yeah, I see at least one head nodding. So okay, so we'll say that that's the case, and we're kind of currently blocked on finding if we can get a volunteer. I'll leave it on the agenda. We'll see if any of the TC members who aren't here volunteer to do that, or maybe I guess there could be other people in the community as well. And otherwise, we'll talk about it next time as well. Anything more we should talk about on this one before we move on to the next issue?
So essentially, we are trying is the survey result is going to help us take a right decision.
Right, it's to gather more information that will help TSC members decide how they would vote.
Okay.
Right,
so
like I think it's, go ahead.
Essentially, the patterns or the usage patterns or the interest from the community, from the user ecosystem is taken as one of the, if not necessarily the most important consideration, but one of the consideration in making a decision.
I think that the assertion was that, like, we probably understand that there's going to be extra work and we have potential for extra security security vulnerabilities, but that if it's going to be super, super valuable to our end users, then that's fine. We should take on that extra work, right? And I think the point is that there's an assertion that that's the case, but perhaps we don't have enough, information to confirm that yet for the TSC members to say, yeah, okay, I'm convinced that that's the case, and therefore I'll vote for it. And so gathering some more information might help fill that in.
Okay.
Yeah, I see the additional point, Miles, is, that's actually true too, is like bringing in 1.0 that's not actively maintained. That's kind of where I was back to, like, if we got the results from that survey, would it basically, I just wanted to validate that it would actually change. There aren't any other fundamental issues, like if everybody says yes, but we're not going to take 1.x because it's the end of line, we shouldn't necessarily block on that, right? So I guess, like, we've got consensus on the next step. We can kind of talk about that as we craft the survey. We should make sure that it's gathering all the info, and or these other things. I just want to make sure that if we actually do block on a survey, there aren't some other issues which, once that comes back and it's like, then we're like, well, it's just a no because of this other reason or something, right? Because then we should discuss those other reasons first. But I think we agreed on next steps. We can discuss next meeting. Dries, did you have any other questions before we move on?
No, I'm good with that. Thank you.
Thanks. FS remove permissive RMDIR. So this is 37216. I see that there is a good discussion there, agenda. So I think Antoine added this one as well. It was on the agenda for visibility. I'm just looking in terms of, approvals. I think it is Semver major, so it will take a few more approvals. I think it pretty much lines up with, I guess the ask really is for, I don't want to dive in and try and figure it out on the fly. So I think the ask is that we look at this and approve if we think we're comfortable with it, because it is Semper major.
I just want to say that I'm not against this change, but in case you're not aware, the alternative API is not available on Node 12. So that means that if someone wants to support Node 12 to 16, they would have to have a conditional somewhere to use the old API or the new one.
Okay. And I guess the flip to that is the longer it's there, then the old one I think was fairly new, right?
It was added in a minor during LTS, I think, yes, but I don't know how new it is.
Right. Or I think at very least it became non-experimental quite recently. It's kind of like we'd agreed with, well, we'll make it non-experimental, but then we're going to deprecate and move to this other approach. So the longer it's there, that could be a sort of flip side of another factor into whether you want to do it sooner or later. That's a very good point, Michael. I'm writing that down as a note. Any other discussion? Any other discussion comments that we should have before moving on? I think the ask would be like, please review, comment, and then you know, we'll leave it on the agenda to see if it's gotten or not the approvals it needs next week. Okay, if not, let's move on to the next one, which is align HTTP align stream writable. This is 36816. This was opened by Ronag quite a while ago. I'm just looking for why. Was added 16 days. So okay, so this is again needs some more TSC approvals. So basically, yeah, and so it was on the agenda for an FYI, still needs some additional reviews / approvals, and looking in particular like for some people from the HTTP front to review. So I think we'll leave on until next time. Does anybody have anything to add or discuss on this one? Okay, if not, let's move on to the TLS improve compliance with shutdown standard remove hacks. This is 36111. Agenda, I'm just looking again to see who added that. So Rich added that to the agenda, but he's not here this week. So let's see if we can figure out. I guess this one I think is really waiting for some feedback from James is the. And there's just the last comment is he still just hasn't had time to look at it. So I unless anybody else has anything to comment on this one, I think we can skip until next time. Okay, so we'll take silence as yeah, let's move on. The next one is rename default branch from master to main. I will open that one. I think this is really on the list for us to keep attention on it. I did generate a list of our repos, non-archived repos, and you know, there's some checkboxes that show all of the ones which are already, you know, using something other than master. I think at this point, it's really just a matter of people going through and well, it's figuring out our strategy for getting people to go through and actually do the renames. I suspect we want to do most of the ones other than Node Core because that's going to be the trickiest one, I think. But so I don't know if people have any thoughts on how we make progress on this one, or is it just okay to leave it as a checklist of, you know, things people can go and think about? I think it does require TSC involvement because we're the only ones who can do the rename. Is that fair? I guess different groups, like working groups, could probably do the ones that they own, but.
TSC, ComCom, and moderation, all three teams have access to do it.
Right.
I don't think working groups have permission to administrate repositories in most cases.
Okay, so basically, I think that's where we should leave it on our list, and you know, if we're comfortable just sort of leaving it as and when things happen, we can just leave the list. If we think we need to be more proactive, we can try and figure out how to, you know, subdivide a group. You know, we could schedule like an hour where we all got together and looked at them and figured out, can we rename them or whatever. But I guess I'll assume, unless somebody speaks up, that we just leave it as a, when people have time and interest, they'll go and take a look at it. Okay, I guess silence, I will assume that that's the case. So I'll basically said, okay, any interest in an RFC process? This one, 962, I know Rich had made some comments on. But since he's not here, this is one where, you know, is there anybody who's up to speed, wants to drive some discussion today on this one? There has kind of been a related discussion or issue about surfacing, you know, like node fetch. There was a discussion related to that in terms of like, there may be some sort of context where people have thought about it and we've kind of made a decision, but that's not documented anywhere. So there's some discussion going on that front in terms of, should we document those kind of things somewhere? But that's maybe, it's related, but maybe a little bit of a tangent to this one. So I guess unless somebody wants to lead the discussion on this one, I suggest we skip until Rich is here. Sound good to everybody? Okay, the next one is the Apple Silicon Plan. So this is issue number 866. So go ahead.
Ash added an update in the TSC issue.
I'm just looking, was that in this issue or a different issue?
The agenda one, I can read it out if you like.
Okay, sure.
Yep, so V8 issues are fixed and they have a green CI on the job. And Ash has turned on the node test commit so that all PRs should get tested. And he's also in parallel having a discussion about sourcing the hardware sourcing, because at the moment we're using the DTKs. So future hardware resources.
I think the other thing worth mentioning in that update is I think, at least from my discussions, I'll say we haven't had the full discussion with all the people in the build working group, but from some discussions with me, Beth, and Ash, we're thinking that it might make sense to build both on M1 and Intel and build fat binaries for both, and then test those fat binaries. So basically, you know, on Intel, you build and test the fat binary, and on M1, you build and test the fat binary. Now, for each of those tests, they would be testing, obviously, like on the x86 case, we would have tested the x86 part. On M1, we would have tested the M1 part. But our shipping binaries would continue to, at least for the short term, be built with x86. The potential gap there is we won't have anything that actually tests the fat binary built on x86 on M1. And we thought it would probably be good enough to do, you know, maybe manually make sure that that works, but from that point on, assume that, yeah, the Mac and Apple infrastructure, which lets you build fat binaries on either, works. So I guess it's like, just mention that because that's one area where it's like, that'll simplify our testing significantly in the work that we need. But if people have concerns with that, you know, this is an FYI that's one of the options we're considering. And if you do have concerns, to let the build team know. Any other questions or discussion on that one? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the next one, which is renaming an API. I think this one I can take off the agenda. We discussed it in a previous meeting. I think we had consensus on the path that was being proposed, and there's work to sort of slowly do some of the documentation renaming and stuff, and we're not planning to change the symbols and all that kind of stuff. Any comments, questions, or comfortable with me just doing that? We'll skip on to the next one. No, okay. So removed, already discussed. Moved agenda item. The next one, agenda tag. Potential stagnation of open issues in H1 bounty program. So there has been some discussion in terms of how we actually do the sort of, how we handle the backlog, how we hand that over to the volunteer, the company that that has volunteered to take that over. I think next step is for me to actually forward that proposal on to the foundation to get their input. And then based on that, we can move forward. I'm going to assume based on the there hasn't been any additional comments on the email thread that we're good with the current proposal. OpenJS team. Okay, so that's at the end of our agenda items. We have a few minutes left, so let me just open up the strategic initiatives section. Okay, I'm looking, so V8 currency, Michael, is there an update on that or things to discuss?
Sorry, yes, I wrote in the issue. So we are up to date now. So on master, we have version 8.9, which is scheduled to be stable next week. And I don't think we have major issues on Canary.
Okay. Okay, so basically things going good, no issues or anything you want to bring up?
Yep.
Okay, it's going through. I don't know, Joey, if you have an update on the startup performance side of things.
So we just landed the pull request to support binding data in the snapshot, and we're going through other embedded object types in order to support userland snapshot in the future.
Okay, so which you landed the PR to include, what was it?
I've put it in the meeting issue.
Okay, so I can go back and copy it from there. I'll do that afterwards. Okay, sounds good. Anything else you want to add on that front?
Nope.
Okay, build resources, I don't have any update. Mary, I don't know if you have anything on future build chain.
I haven't worked on it for a while, but we have a new volunteer. I commented on the issue, and he's going to be helping moving forward with this initiative.
Okay, that's good. Or sorry, I guess I should have looked at the updates on the issue themselves, but okay, so that takes us to the end of the strategic initiatives that we have people here for. And we're pretty much at time. So are there any other issues that people would like to discuss or cover before we close out for today? I think we discussed that we didn't need a private section this time.
There's one or two things I'd like to say that are very quick. They don't take a lot of time.
Okay, so we'll close out the meeting, and if people can stick around. So let me stop